this, the view is that the market is falling in its under its own weight, and some of the earnings actually spooked. See, look at how HDFC earnings got punished, LTI Monetary got punished, Asian Paint not bad, but yeah, you can say that some of the part of the market believes bad earnings are getting punished, and the narrative that everything is hunky dory is getting challenged because earnings is not seeing follow through. What are your thoughts on this argument?
I'll answer it in two halves. Good to but those to me look to be more company specific. I think the final word on the earnings season will be written more towards the end of this month, and I don't see any major worries from a macro perspective, from a total market perspective. Once the manufacturing numbers start coming in, you will find that maybe margins will hold up a little well. The festival demand has been all that bad. I think there will be pockets where the numbers will be fairly strong. On an overall aggregate number, I don't think there's much to worry about. What you've seen so far is company specific issues, and not even in those sectors. Other companies have announced fairly strong results. The second part is that is the market falling on its own weight, and if, for sure, you saw the rally in the fourth quarter of calendar 23. That has made the market a little bit fragile, and obviously, if that follows up in specific companies that don't deliver, the punishment will be severe and quick, and that's what we are seeing. So yes, when you're sitting on top of a sharp rally like that, market does tend to be a little fragile.
Private banks. I want to talk about earnings growth, NIM, and valuations of private banks. Now, the fear after HDFC is that some other private banks may also kind of display disappointment on asset quality, liquidity, and loan growth. Do you think that's a justified fear, or it will be very bank to bank specific?
I take a broader and B, a longer term view on the private bank space. I think calendar 24 will be challenging on margins. I don't know what will happen in this quarter, probably a little early, but once the rate easing cycle starts, we've seen that, given the exposure to EBLR loans, once the repo rate gets cut, there's an immediate hit on margins. It will recover in subsequently, but it will take some time for that, the initial hit is fairly large, and we've seen most of the large private sector banks are heavily exposed to mortgages, which makes them a little vulnerable at the early part of the easing cycle. The longer term view on the sector is that it is one of our top underweight calls as far as sectors are concerned. Not, the calendar 24 cyclical downturn is part of the reason, but I think the sector has structurally derated post-COVID, and that derating is here to stay. Growth rates and margins are not what they used to be in the pre-COVID period, when they were growing faster, had smaller bases, were gaining share at the expense of the state-owned banks. And ROEs are also depressed because pockets of supernormal profitability are slowly getting eroded away, either by competition or by regulation. So if you take a one-year view, we are underweight private sector banks. It's a large part of the index, so most benchmarked investors will have to hold some of it, but we would be underweight that. And we don't think this underperformance that we've seen post-COVID, not post-COVID, there were periods when some of the private sector banks were coming out of were turnaround storage and re-rating, but most of them are settled. I don't think you're going to get much of a re-rating. In some cases, you will see price to book ratios on a declining trend, and the sector will underperform the broader market in 2024.
Very valid point, I would say. I want to understand, one of your peers have recently said that NBFCs is the area to focus on, not the banks. I see your interest lies in some of the microfinance kind of names as well. In fact, why only microfinance? High growth, technology backed NBFCs are also doing very well, at least on the numbers and stock performance side as well. Would you be constructive here? Microfinance, along with a dash of technology-backed NBFCs, perhaps some NBFs who are focusing on MSMEs?
Yeah, I would do stock picking in microfinance, but it's not a big enough sector to compensate for banks, and it's not. When you can't look at microfinance as a substitute for financials, which is 29% of the index. There's not enough stocks, not enough market cap. Uh, in theory, yes, NBFCs will show more resilient margins, but easier said than done in terms of finding stocks to buy. The larger cap names there are very stretched in terms of valuations. And we've seen post COVID that for the financials as well as any other sector, mispriced or misvalued companies, even though they may deliver great performance, don't deliver stock price performance. So one has to be careful of getting into any stock which is heavily overpriced in terms of valuation. So, and then there's a long tail of very mid to small. There is a lot of opportunities there, but you can't pick those in favor of the large private sector banks, which are, you know, very large weightage in the index. So while in theory it is possible it makes good sense to be in NBFCs versus banks. If your benchmark is a large, the relative resilience of NBFC is cold comfort because the good ones are now valued. The valuations have stretched beyond logic.
Fair point. That's a very fair point. Shadri, where in this market do you find best risk reward? Where earnings are likely to improve going forward in the next 2, 3, 4 quarters, but market is still not believing with that hypothesis, and hence nobody wants to look at that area.
I have some overweight sectors. They may not meet all the criteria that you just listed out. We like consumer durables, consumer discretionary, sorry, not durables. Mainly because autos is classified within that segment, and autos we like. We prefer two-wheelers within the autos, but I personally like the entire auto ancillary space. Industrials is also, I think, I know it's overheated. There are pockets of overvaluation, but it's a large disaggregated sector. You can find many good companies within that space as well. So these are our two key overweight sectors from our perspective. There's some smaller ones. These are our two key overweight sectors.
What are your top preferences in pharma? Do you think things are turning around out there? And earnings also looking. See, last quarter, if you remember, some of the big ones had upgraded their outlook.
My suspicion is that pharma would be more stock specific than the entire sector overall. We wouldn't get a major rally in the large caps and in the index heavyweights. Anyway, it's a very small part of the indices. But within pharma, there should be some interesting pockets, especially those pockets which have underperformed for the last 2-3 years. I would look for some value there. I think some of those could turn around, especially if there is, if global commodities does not give us a shock in this year.
Fair point. Do you think there is a merit in going back to value chain of power sector? Not only the engineering and capital good top line or generators, but wires and cables that got derated recently, transformer companies which are seeing good order pipeline, or some of the other forging machining companies in the power space?
Oh, almost certainly. I think power in India is a multi-year structural reform story. There is plenty happening, and it's a sector I've tracked since the 1990s, and some of the changes that are happening are indeed, I wouldn't have thought some of that stuff would happen, in terms of reform. So yes, the demand is multi-year. And therefore the supply chain in power will grow now sequentially for many years to come. It's not a 1 or 2 year cyclical upturn. There is plenty of value to be found in that. Again, I would repeat that buying, even though the company may be great, buying overvalued stocks is a risk in this market. But there is plenty of stocks which have not re-rated to absurd levels, mostly in the small and mid cap space.
Before I let you go, Seshadri, I want to understand what effect would two things have on Indian market. One, growth slowing down globally as we go into the year, China, US. And two, the rate cuts which are likely to start by mid of this year in US, followed by a shallow rate cut cycle in India. Is that these two things factored into the market or not yet?
Not fully. So typically in a rate cut cycle, you see a recovery in growth. Given that the Indian economy is going in fairly hot into the rate easing cycle, the impact on growth or even exports will be not that great. So that's not a great way to play the cycle. What I would more that is our base case as well, that during the middle of the year the Fed cuts and then the RBI follows suit, is that there would be a re-rating of growth stories. So these multi-year growth stories, which especially on the manufacturing, industrials, auto ancillaries, power, all of that, I think there's where a lot of the re-rating would happen. So I would continue to hunt for stocks. Typically, also some of the high growth, high valuation stocks in the Nifty also re-rate, but that I don't think will be as strong a factor this time. At least we are not factoring that in because valuations are still quite high there, and a lot of them are facing slight earnings pressures from somewhere or the other. So I would, be a little careful on that. I would, see mid valuations as the major impact of lower rates.
All right, Seshadri, we'll let you go on that one. Thanks so much for your time.